The tension in the room is palpable as the camera zooms in on Alan Dershowitz, his cold eyes glaring into the camera, his voice dripping with condescension. He leans forward slightly, hands clasped, the air thick with the arrogance that has defined his career. "Let's be clear," he begins, his voice low but cutting through the air like a razor. "Jasmine Crockett may have a law degree, but her qualifications, her experience, they simply don't measure up. She's a product of the system, but not someone who truly understands the intricacies of law, not like the rest of us." The words hang in the air like a slap. The audience in the studio tenses, the silence that follows deafening. Dershowitz, a man whose very name is synonymous with legal mastery, continues without hesitation, as if his attack were a matter of fact. "She's been handed everything she has. There's no real depth to her understanding of the law. It's all politics and ambition. No one would trust her with real legal decisions." Jasmine Crockett, sitting just a few feet away, remains still. Her expression is unreadable, though the fire in her eyes speaks volumes. The camera catches the slight tightening of her jaw, the faint clench of her fists under the table. The insults are deliberate, personal, a calculated attempt to tear her down in front of millions. But then, she speaks. It's not the reaction anyone expects. She doesn't lash out, doesn't let the venom in his words penetrate. Instead, she sits back, the picture of calm. The audience holds its breath, wondering what she will do. But before she can respond, the camera zooms in on her face, and a slow realization creeps in: Jasmine isn't the one on trial here. Dershowitz's words, meant to wound, have set the stage for something much bigger. The very fabric of his arrogance is about to be unraveled. The room falls silent, the tension unbearable. But what happens next leaves even legal experts speechless. The camera cuts to a wide shot, capturing the faces of the studio audience, their eyes darting between Alan Dershowitz and Jasmine Crockett. The mood in the room has shifted. What was once a light-hearted conversation about legal opinions has suddenly turned into something far more serious. The stakes are higher than ever. Alan Dershowitz, the elder statesman of American law, has built a career on defending the indefensible. His name is synonymous with the highest echelons of legal power, having argued countless cases before the U.S. Supreme Court, shaping the legal landscape for decades. His clients have included infamous figures, from political leaders to corporate titans, and his controversial opinions have made him both a hero and a villain in the eyes of the public. The legal world knows him as a man who, for better or worse, is untouchable. His reputation is carved in stone. But then, there's Jasmine Crockett. Crockett's name might not yet carry the weight of Dershowitz's, but it's rapidly gaining traction in legal circles. A rising star, she represents the new face of law, a voice for those often silenced in the traditional halls of justice. Born into a family of immigrants, Crockett's journey to law school wasn't paved with privilege but with grit and perseverance. She earned her stripes not through legacy or connections, but through hard work, breaking down barriers that few others like her have been able to. Her background and her drive have made her a beacon for the next generation of legal minds, those who believe that the law should be a tool for justice, equality, and progress. But in this moment, on this stage, everything she's worked for is being questioned. Dershowitz's insult wasn't just personal, it was an attack on her very existence in the field. It wasn't a critique of one case or one opinion. It was a dismissal of everything she stands for, a subtle yet vicious indictment of her worth, her capability, and her ability to change the system. For Crockett, this is more than a career-defining moment. It's a fight for recognition, for the validation of her expertise in a system that has often been reluctant to accept voices like hers. The law, as she sees it, is supposed to serve everyone, not just the privileged few. Her approach to justice is shaped by her identity, her experiences, and the values she holds dear. The world, especially those who have power, are watching closely. This confrontation, this public humiliation, isn't just about one lawyer tearing down another. It's about the broader fight for representation, for breaking down the old guard that holds on to power by undermining the legitimacy of those who are different. Dershowitz represents the establishment, the status quo that keeps its grip on the legal system. Jasmine represents the future, a future where diversity and inclusivity are not only accepted but valued as essential to the fabric of justice. This isn't just a personal dispute between two legal experts, it's a battle for the soul of American law. The entire nation is watching to see which voice will rise above the other. As the silence in the room deepens, a sense of anticipation fills the air. The audience knows this is no longer about a simple debate. This is about something much larger, the clash of two worlds, two visions for the future of law and justice. And as the tension builds, there's a growing sense that what happens next will shift the balance, that this moment will mark the beginning of a new chapter. What happens next will change the way America sees both these legal giants. Alan Dershowitz is a name that reverberates through the legal world, a towering figure who has spent decades at the pinnacle of American jurisprudence. From his early days at Harvard Law School, where he became one of its youngest tenured professors, to his high-profile defense cases involving powerful individuals, his career has been built on a combination of intellectual brilliance and unapologetic boldness. His legal mind is sharp, his rhetoric venomous, and his ability to navigate the complex world of law unmatched. For many, Dershowitz represents the epitome of legal expertise, an institution unto himself. But beneath this polished exterior lies a man driven by an unrelenting pride, a pride that has often blurred the line between confidence and arrogance. His career has not been without its share of controversy, and many of his most famous cases have left a trail of divided opinions. His defense of controversial figures like O.J. Simpson, Jeffrey Epstein, and others of questionable character has tarnished his reputation in the eyes of many. While some praise his unwavering commitment to the principle that every accused individual deserves a fair trial, others see him as a man willing to defend the indefensible for the right price, his moral compass swayed by wealth, fame, and power. Dershowitz's personal brand of legalism has often drawn lines in the sand, and over the years, he's cultivated an image of a brilliant but deeply polarizing figure. To his supporters, he is the intellectual giant who has shaped constitutional law and safeguarded civil liberties. To his critics, he is a symbol of the establishment, a man who uses his legal acumen not to challenge the system, but to protect it from change, no matter the cost. The legal community is well aware of Dershowitz's tendency to dismiss anyone who doesn't conform to his vision of what law should be. He has often mocked the newer generation of lawyers, those who seek to reform the system, to challenge outdated principles, and to create a more inclusive legal culture. To him, these young voices are naive, idealistic, and, in many cases, undeserving of a seat at the table. He has made it clear in interviews and public speeches that he believes the law is not a place for progressive ideals, but a place for tradition, expertise, and what he considers the tried-and-true methods that have served America for centuries. In a recent interview, Dershowitz went so far as to say, the law is not a place for social justice warriors. It's a place for real legal minds, people who understand the complexities of the system. People like me. His words dripped with the kind of dismissiveness that has come to define his public persona. To him, the influx of younger, diverse voices in the legal field is a threat to his legacy and to the very principles he believes are sacred to the profession. This was precisely what made his insult toward Jasmine Crockett so striking. It wasn't just about her qualifications. It wasn't about the fact that she was challenging him in a televised debate. It was about his belief that she, and others like her, were beneath him, that they had no place in the field that he had dominated for decades. His attack wasn't merely personal, it was a direct assault on the very idea that the legal profession could evolve, could diversify, and could include voices like Jasmine's. Dershowitz has spent his career in the corridors of power, where legal decisions often seem more about who you know than what you know. His influence stretches across both the academic and political landscapes, and he's used that influence to shape legal outcomes that have far-reaching effects. He's fought in the courts for everything from civil liberties to criminal justice reform, though some of his most ardent critics argue that his version of reform often favors the powerful over the vulnerable. Despite his wealth, status, and success, Dershowitz has become a figure that many younger lawyers view with skepticism. They see him as a relic of a past that they want to leave behind, a past that values status over substance, wealth over principle, and tradition over progress. It's this tension, this fundamental divide between the old and the new, that has made Dershowitz a villain in the eyes of many. And yet, despite his controversies and contradictions, he has always managed to land on his feet, largely unscathed by the public backlash. His arrogance has shielded him from the consequences that might have toppled lesser figures. He remains untouchable, a man whose opinions are considered gospel by some and scorned by others, but never truly dethroned. But now, with Jasmine Crockett sitting across from him, the old guard of legal traditionalism is being forced to confront something it hasn't had to in years, a formidable opponent who refuses to stay in her lane. Jasmine is not intimidated by the weight of Dershowitz's reputation or the scope of his influence. In fact, she's here to challenge it. She's here to remind the world that the law isn't just a place for the powerful and the privileged, it's a place for the people, for the marginalized, and for those who believe in justice, equality, and progress. But what Dershowitz didn't expect was a formidable opponent who wasn't afraid to challenge his legacy. Jasmine Crockett's story isn't one of privilege or inherited connections. It's a story of resilience, of fighting against odds that most would consider insurmountable, and of using every obstacle as fuel to push forward. Born to immigrant parents in a working-class neighborhood, Jasmine's early life was defined by a sense of urgency to succeed, urgency to prove that she belonged in spaces where few people like her had ever dared to enter. Her mother, a nurse, worked tirelessly to make ends meet. Her father, a factory worker, spent long hours on his feet, often coming home late, tired, but never too exhausted to encourage Jasmine to reach for something bigger. They didn't have much, but what they lacked in material wealth, they more than made up for in ambition and sacrifice. From a young age, Jasmine was taught that hard work and determination were her greatest assets. It wasn't about waiting for a chance, it was about creating one. In school, Jasmine excelled, but she always felt like an outsider. At her predominantly white high school, she was one of the few students of color. She didn't fit into the stereotypical molds of either the quiet, compliant student or the defiant rebel. She was ambitious and driven, a mindset that often led to her being viewed as too much by those who preferred to keep things as they were. She faced both subtle and overt discrimination, with classmates dismissing her ideas or undermining her contributions. But where others might have wilted, Jasmine flourished. She used every criticism, every microaggression, as motivation to prove she was worthy, that she could stand toe-to-toe with anyone who doubted her. Her decision to pursue law was born not from a desire for prestige, but from a deep-seated belief that the law could be a vehicle for change. She didn't want to be just another lawyer, she wanted to be a voice for the voiceless, a force that would challenge the systemic injustices she had witnessed growing up. She applied to the most competitive law schools, facing rejections and doubts, but each setback only fueled her resolve. Finally, after an exhaustive application process, she was accepted to a top-tier law school, a significant victory, but one that was merely the first chapter in a journey that would test every part of her character. At law school, Jasmine found herself one of the few women of color in a field dominated by men, and even more so by white men. She had to constantly prove herself, not just as a student, but as a future legal expert. In class discussions, she was often met with skepticism. Professors questioned her views, classmates ignored her contributions, and her classmates were quick to assume that her success was due to affirmative action rather than merit. Yet, Jasmine refused to be deterred. She studied late into the night, always prepared, always over-prepared. When she was called on in class, she spoke with clarity, with authority, challenging the assumptions of those around her, earning both respect and ire in the process. Her summers were spent interning at public interest organizations, fighting for civil rights, workers' rights, and environmental justice. Her passion for equality and fairness was infectious, and she quickly earned a reputation for being both incredibly sharp and incredibly dedicated. Despite the glass ceilings that loomed overhead, Jasmine remained focused. She was never in law for the prestige or the paycheck, she was in it for the fight to change the system from within, to give voice to those whose struggles had long been ignored by the establishment. Upon graduating, Jasmine could have easily chosen the traditional, lucrative path of corporate law, where her credentials and intellect would have been easily recognized. But that was never her calling. Instead, she chose to work in public service, representing clients who had been failed by the system, immigrants seeking asylum, workers struggling for basic rights, and people whose legal battles had been deemed unworthy of attention by the mainstream legal establishment. Every case she took on was a testament to her commitment to justice, to the idea that the law was supposed to protect the vulnerable, not just the powerful. It was during this time that Jasmine's reputation began to grow. Her legal acumen was undeniable, but it was her compassion, her ability to connect with people on a human level, that set her apart. She wasn't just fighting for clients, she was fighting for a cause, the cause of justice, equity, and fairness. And as her name began to spread, so did the criticism. The legal establishment, with its entrenched power structures, didn't know what to make of her. Some saw her as a threat, a young woman with an unrelenting sense of justice who had no qualms about challenging the status quo. It was here that her journey intersected with Alan Dershowitz. He represented everything she had worked against, the establishment that used the law to perpetuate inequality, the voices that silenced the marginalized in favor of preserving their own power. He was the epitome of what Jasmine viewed as a flawed legal system, one that placed tradition and status over true justice. She respected his intellect, but not his worldview. And now, here she was, on this stage, facing him head-on. The fight wasn't just about proving herself in the legal field anymore. This was a battle for the soul of the profession. Dershowitz's words, his attack on her credibility, weren't just an affront to her, they were an affront to everything she stood for. But Jasmine wasn't just prepared for the insults, she was ready to turn the tables. In this moment, she wasn't the young woman trying to find her place in a male-dominated field. She wasn't the underdog fighting for recognition. She was a woman who had been forged in the fire of adversity, a woman who had faced rejection, discrimination, and doubt at every turn, and had come out stronger for it. This was her moment. And nothing, not even Alan Dershowitz, was going to take that away from her. The room is thick with tension, the energy almost palpable. Alan Dershowitz, ever the seasoned provocateur, leans in, his eyes locked on Jasmine Crockett as though daring her to challenge him again. His voice, smooth yet cutting, fills the air as he continues to dismiss her qualifications with a confidence that borders on arrogance. "Let's not kid ourselves, Jasmine," Dershowitz says, his tone dripping with condescension. "You've had a fair share of attention. But just because you've made a name for yourself in certain circles doesn't mean you belong in the arena of true legal giants. You may have a law degree, but the practical experience, the depth of understanding required to engage in real legal matters, well, that takes years of hard work. It's not just about ideology or catching a headline. It's about real substance, something you clearly don't possess." Jasmine remains unmoved, her hands calmly resting on the table in front of her. The cameras cut to her face, and her composed expression speaks volumes. There's a flicker of something beneath the surface, not anger, but a quiet, determined focus. She doesn't flinch at Dershowitz's words. Her gaze stays steady, unwavering, as if she's seen this type of attack before, and it no longer holds the power it once did. "Mr. Dershowitz, with all due respect," Jasmine replies, her voice steady and controlled, "I disagree with your assessment. I don't believe experience is measured simply by how long one has been entrenched in the same system. It's about the ability to see where the system fails and to challenge it, to stand up for those who have no voice, those whose rights are trampled underfoot." Dershowitz's smirk widens, clearly enjoying the verbal sparring. "Oh, I'm sure your intentions are noble, but intentions don't win cases. What matters is the law, the actual law, not the fantasies some people think they can impose on it. I've spent decades shaping legal thought, setting precedents. What exactly have you done? What real cases have you won that have changed anything significant?" The question lands like a punch. It's clear Dershowitz believes he's gaining ground, chipping away at Jasmine's credibility in front of the cameras. The audience can feel the shift in the air, the growing discomfort of some, while others seem to sit back, waiting for her to crack. But Jasmine doesn't crack. She stands her ground, her gaze steady on him, unflinching. "It's not just about the cases I've won," Jasmine responds, her voice calm but now carrying a weight behind it that wasn't there before. "It's about the people I've fought for. The ones who have no money, no influence. The ones whose voices have been silenced because they don't fit your idea of who deserves justice. Those are the people I represent. That's the law I practice, the law that cares about people, not just procedures." Dershowitz laughs, a hollow sound. "People. Justice for people. You're speaking in platitudes, Jasmine. You're trying to sell an emotional narrative. But law isn't a social justice project. Law is about objectivity, about facts. You can't change the system by feeling sorry for people." Jasmine's jaw tightens, but she doesn't raise her voice. Instead, her eyes narrow slightly, as if calculating her next move. Dershowitz continues, sensing victory, as if every word is a step closer to discrediting her completely. "You see, that's the problem with your generation," he continues, his voice sharp. "You think the law is some kind of charity. You want to make it about your feelings, your ideology. But it's not about your narrative. It's about facts, about cold, hard logic. If you can't grasp that, you'll never truly succeed in this profession." The audience is silent now, the air thick with anticipation. Jasmine is still. Her lips press into a thin line as she listens, but the composure is not just for show. The silence grows heavier, almost unbearable. The longer Jasmine waits, the more palpable the tension becomes. Dershowitz believes he has her cornered now, her resolve finally starting to crack. He leans back in his chair, as if relishing the moment of triumph, confident in his superiority. His expression is one of victory, but he can't see what's coming. Jasmine, ever the picture of calm, shifts slightly in her seat, a small but deliberate movement. For the first time, she speaks with the same confidence but with an edge that cuts through the tension like a knife. "You're right about one thing, Alan," she begins, her voice unwavering but charged with something deeper now. "The law is about facts. But the law is also about people. And for too long, it's been about protecting the powerful, those who can afford to manipulate the system. You've spent your career defending the status quo, not because it's right, but because it benefits you." Her words are measured, each one deliberate, and the audience is hanging on to every syllable. Dershowitz's smile falters slightly, as if he's finally recognizing the shift in the room. Jasmine continues, her eyes never leaving his. "You've built your career on defending people who already had the system in their corner. But what about those who have no power? What about the marginalized, the disenfranchised? You've never had to face the law from that perspective, Alan. You've never had to fight to survive in a system that was never meant for you. So, don't sit here and tell me that you understand what it means to truly fight for justice." The words land with precision. For a brief moment, Dershowitz's smug demeanor slips, the glimmer of uncertainty flashing in his eyes. The audience, once silent, shifts. Whispers ripple through the room. But when Jasmine finally speaks, it's not just a response, it's a game changer. The room is a taut wire, every eye trained on Jasmine as she prepares to speak. She's no longer just defending herself, she's about to unravel Alan Dershowitz's entire argument, piece by piece. Her calm demeanor remains, but her words now carry the weight of someone who knows that this moment could shift the trajectory of the entire debate. The audience leans forward, sensing the tension in the air. Jasmine takes a slow breath, gathering her thoughts. She doesn't rush, doesn't stumble. Every word is deliberate, chosen with care, yet each one lands like a well-aimed punch. She turns toward Dershowitz, who is still sitting back, arms crossed, waiting for her to flounder. The same smug expression plays across his face, though it's beginning to look increasingly strained. "Alan," she begins, her voice measured and confident, "you claim the law is not a place for ideology, that it's about facts, cold hard logic. And yet, the very system you defend is built on a foundation of inequalities that you choose to ignore because they don't affect you. You talk about the law as if it's an objective entity, as if it doesn't have its own biases, its own history of favoritism. The reality is, the law, like any institution, is shaped by those who hold power. And for far too long, that power has been in the hands of people who look like you, wealthy, white, and unbothered by the struggles of those who fall outside your circle. The words are sharp, but they're not delivered with anger. Jasmine is calm, deliberate, and every syllable seems to pierce through the wall that Dershowitz has built around his beliefs. He shifts in his seat slightly, but his eyes never leave hers. His confident demeanor is slipping, the cracks starting to show. You see, the law isn't just about applying abstract principles, she continues, her voice carrying the weight of her experiences. It's about understanding the human condition. And you, Alan, you've spent your career defending a system that prioritizes power and wealth over people. You claim to be a defender of civil liberties, but when push comes to shove, you defend those who are already in positions of privilege. Let's talk about your record, your defense of figures like Jeffrey Epstein. Do you honestly believe that was a case of upholding the law, or was it an exercise in preserving your own status? Dershowitz's face tightens, the muscles in his jaw visibly clenching as he absorbs her words. The camera zooms in on his face, capturing the subtle shift in his expression, a crack in the veneer of calm confidence he's worn for so long. But Jasmine is just getting started. I'll give you credit, Alan, Jasmine says, her tone now colder, more calculated. You've played the game well. You've built an empire of legal expertise, but at what cost? How many people have been left behind while you've been playing the role of the great protector of the status quo? Your arguments about the law being objective, about it being above politics, that's the very attitude that keeps the system broken. You want to talk about facts? Well, here are the facts: systemic inequality exists. It's present in our courts, in our prisons, and in our laws. And as much as you like to pretend otherwise, that inequality doesn't disappear just because you say it does. The crowd is starting to stir now, the tension in the air rising as people begin to realize that this is no longer a simple back and forth. Jasmine is methodically dismantling Dershowitz's argument, layer by layer. The room, once filled with the easy confidence of the old guard, now feels unsettled, unsure of which side the tide is turning toward. You claim that the law is not a place for ideology, but let's not forget that law, like any system, is shaped by the ideologies of those who create and interpret it, Jasmine continues. You speak about the law as a neutral force, but the law has always been political. It has always reflected the values of the powerful, and those values are rarely aligned with the needs of the marginalized. Let's talk about the criminal justice system, a system that disproportionately affects black and brown communities. You defend this system, Alan, but I'm here to tell you that it's broken. And it's not enough to simply keep applying the same principles over and over again and expect different results. Jasmine's voice rises slightly, but it's still composed. There's no rage, no bitterness, just clarity. The camera lingers on Dershowitz, who has yet to interrupt. His lips twitch, a sign that he's struggling to maintain control. The crowd watches, captivated by the sheer force of Jasmine's argument. Her calm is a weapon in itself, steady, unrelenting, and deeply persuasive. You've built your career on defending the powerful, Alan. But when we talk about justice, we're talking about fairness. We're talking about the ability of the law to protect those who are most vulnerable, not the ones who are already protected by their wealth, their connections, and their privilege. Your definition of justice, it's one that serves a small, elite group of people. But justice isn't for the few. It's for the many. The audience reacts, a mix of gasps and murmurs filling the air. Jasmine's words have clearly struck a chord. Dershowitz, once the master of the debate, now seems off balance. His eyes narrow, his posture shifts, but his usual bravado has faltered. The confident smirk has been replaced by something else, something far more uncertain. Alan, Jasmine says, her tone softening just slightly, but with a sharp edge, "You've spent your career defending a version of justice that doesn't serve the majority of people in this country. And you can stand there and pretend that your way is the only way, but the truth is, you've never had to fight for justice the way so many people have. And that's why you'll never truly understand what it means to protect the law. Not until you see it from the side of the people who need it the most." For a moment, the room is silent. The camera holds on Dershowitz's face, capturing the subtle shift in his expression, the uncertainty, the frustration. His mouth opens, but no words come out. He's struggling, not only to respond but to regain his footing in a debate he once dominated. Dershowitz, once untouchable, was now left struggling to find his footing. The debate had barely ended, but the impact of Jasmine Crockett's words rippled through the world with the speed and force of a tidal wave. Social media, already a battleground of opinions and outrage, erupted into chaos. On Twitter, hashtags like #CrockettCrushesDershowitz and #JusticeForThePeople quickly began trending, overshadowing every other topic. Screenshots of Jasmine's calm, calculated response to Alan Dershowitz's attack spread like wildfire across every platform: Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and beyond. Everyone had something to say, and everyone was saying it loud. Legal experts, some previously critical of Crockett, took to their feeds to publicly re-evaluate their opinions. "Jasmine Crockett just showed us all what real legal expertise looks like," one prominent civil rights attorney tweeted. "It's not about defending the powerful, it's about using the law to protect the powerless." Retweets flooded in, the response overwhelmingly positive, as if a collective sigh of relief had echoed through the legal community. The fight for a more inclusive, justice-driven system was no longer a far-off dream, it was a reality unfolding right in front of them. Journalists picked up the story, not just for the drama of the confrontation but for its deep implications. The headlines weren't just about a debate anymore, they were about a changing of the guard. Jasmine Crockett's moment of reckoning for the legal establishment, read one headline. Another, how Crockett took down Dershowitz's legal empire. The story wasn't just about one lawyer versus another, it was about a generational shift, a challenge to the entrenched power structures that had long defined the legal system. In the world of legal commentary, the conversation was intense. Panels of legal experts discussed the ramifications of the debate for hours. On cable news, commentators who had once dismissed Jasmine as too inexperienced to challenge the likes of Dershowitz were now praising her brilliance and composure. "What we witnessed today was more than a legal showdown," said one commentator. "It was a watershed moment for the future of law in America. The next generation is ready to take the reins, and Jasmine Crockett is leading the charge." Even celebrities weighed in, some with support, others cautiously observing. Actress Kerry Washington tweeted, "Jasmine Crockett showed us what it means to stay calm, stay smart, and keep fighting for what's right. Let's all take notes." Other Hollywood stars shared similar sentiments, using their platforms to amplify the debate's underlying message, that law, like society, must evolve to reflect the voices and needs of all people, not just the elite. But it wasn't just the legal world and entertainment that took notice. Across the country, people were talking. In living rooms, on public transportation, at dinner tables, the question was no longer who had won the debate. It was about what had been revealed, the stark contrast between the old way of doing things, where the powerful made the rules, and the new wave, which aimed to make the law a tool for fairness, equality, and justice. Jasmine's composed dismantling of Dershowitz's arguments had struck a chord. It wasn't just her legal acumen that had won the moment, it was her unwavering commitment to the idea that the law should serve everyone, not just the privileged few. The hashtag #CrockettCrushesDershowitz soon surpassed all expectations. It wasn't just trending in the US, it was going global. International legal professionals took to their social media accounts to voice their approval, with many recognizing the historical significance of the moment. For the first time in a long time, we saw a true representation of what it means to fight for justice, one prominent UK-based lawyer posted. Jasmine Crockett is an example for us all. In the aftermath of the debate, Jasmine's popularity surged. Her name was being mentioned alongside the likes of Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Thurgood Marshall as a future leader of legal reform. Law schools invited her to speak, eager to have their students hear firsthand about her approach to justice. She had become not just a rising star but a symbol of what the future of law could look like: inclusive, just, and driven by a moral compass that prioritized people over power. However, the waves of praise were met with backlash from the other side. Dershowitz, still reeling from the public humiliation, released a statement calling the debate a misrepresentation of his views. He claimed that his words had been taken out of context, and that the legal establishment had nothing to learn from a politically driven performance. His supporters rallied, attempting to regain the narrative, but it was clear that the damage had been done. The public was no longer on his side, and his attempts to downplay the confrontation only made him seem defensive and out of touch. Behind closed doors, the fallout was even more intense. Dershowitz, once the undisputed legal giant, found himself isolated in ways he hadn't anticipated. His calls for allies and old colleagues to rally around him fell flat. The legal community that once praised his every word was now questioning his motives, his ethics, and his ability to remain relevant in an era where the fight for justice was evolving so rapidly. He was being forced to confront his own legacy, a legacy built on defending the powerful at the expense of those who truly needed the protection of the law. As the media frenzy continued, Jasmine remained largely silent, allowing the waves of support to speak for her. She was, after all, no stranger to standing her ground. She had already proven her point. The world was now watching, and she didn't need to say anything more to know that the legal world had begun to take her seriously. The fight wasn't over, not by a long shot, but she had won this battle. But the real story was just beginning. As the fallout continued, Dershowitz was forced to confront his own demons, and in doing so, he would have to face a world that had changed while he was busy defending the status quo. The media storm had quieted down, but Jasmine Crockett's words lingered in the air. The world was watching, not just for her victory in the debate, but for what she represented: a new way of looking at law, a new vision of justice, and a new voice in a system that had long been dominated by the powerful. She had already proven her point in the most public of ways, but now, as the dust settled, it was time to give her final statement, to reflect on what had just transpired and to offer a broader message for everyone watching. Jasmine's response wasn't one of triumph or boastful celebration. She had nothing to prove anymore. She wasn't interested in gloating. Instead, in the aftermath of the debate, she turned her attention to something more important: the message that had to be heard, not just by legal professionals, but by every person who had ever been made to feel less than because of their background, their identity, or their circumstances. As the camera zoomed in on her, a calmness enveloped her. The tension of the past few hours seemed to evaporate. Jasmine stood at the center of this moment, no longer just the young lawyer taking down a legal giant. She was now an embodiment of something much larger: the future of law, the fight for justice, and the power of integrity in the face of opposition. "Here's the thing, Alan," she began, her voice steady, her words cutting through the noise. "What this debate was really about wasn't just my qualifications, or even your perspective on the law. It was about power: who holds it, who gets to shape it, and who gets left behind. You see, the law has always been about power. For too long, it's been about protecting the privileged, upholding the status quo, and justifying systems that don't work for everyone." She paused, taking a breath, her eyes scanning the room, her gaze firm but not harsh. It was a gaze that demanded attention, respect, and acknowledgement. The room, once divided by the tension of the debate, was now hanging on her every word. "But that's changing," Jasmine continued, her voice growing stronger, more resolute. "The law isn't a tool for preserving what's always been. It's a tool for change. And change doesn't come from the people who sit comfortably at the top. It comes from those of us who have had to fight, who have had to scratch and claw our way into the room, and who will not stop until we make sure that the law works for all of us, not just the ones who have always had the most." Her words were powerful, but they weren't delivered with anger. There was no bitterness in her tone, just the calm authority of someone who knew that they were right, someone who had seen the flaws in the system and was determined to fix them, no matter the opposition. This wasn't about winning a debate. This was about something much bigger, changing the very foundation of how justice was understood. For all of his accomplishments, Alan Dershowitz has spent his career defending a system that doesn't serve everyone. And that's what this fight is really about. Not about me versus him, but about who gets to define what justice really is, she said, her eyes meeting the camera, speaking directly to the millions watching. Justice isn't about arrogance or history. It's not about who's been around the longest or who has the most connections. Justice is about truth. And the truth is always the most powerful weapon. The room was silent for a moment, as if the weight of her words had settled into the minds of everyone present. Jasmine's calmness, her unwavering composure, had become her greatest strength. She wasn't just responding to an attack, she was reshaping the conversation, redirecting it to the very principles that should guide the law: fairness, truth, and equality for all. People like me, she continued, her voice unwavering, we're not looking for handouts. We're not looking to take over the system. We're just asking for a seat at the table. We're asking for a seat at the table for those who have been ignored, for those who have been silenced, and for those whose rights have been violated because of the system you defend. The law isn't just a profession for the elite, for the wealthy, or for the well-connected. It's for the people. It's for everyone. Jasmine paused, letting her words sink in. She wasn't just speaking to Alan. She was speaking to the world, to everyone who had ever felt left behind, dismissed, or unheard. Her voice wasn't just the voice of a lawyer. It was the voice of a generation that was tired of waiting for change. Justice is not about preserving power, she said, her voice softening with a sense of conviction. Justice is about lifting others up, about making sure that the law reflects the needs and the dignity of every single person. And that's the future I'm fighting for. That's the future I believe in. The crowd, once divided, now erupted into applause. It wasn't just a moment of praise for Jasmine's intellectual victory, it was a recognition of something much deeper, the shift she had just set in motion. The applause wasn't just for her skill in law, but for her belief in a better, more inclusive future. Jasmine Crockett had taken a personal attack and turned it into a defining moment not just for her career, but for the entire legal profession. She had proven that true strength wasn't about arrogance or pedigree. It was about having the courage to stand up for what's right, no matter the cost. As the applause continued, Jasmine took one last, slow breath, her gaze steady. She had made her point, and the world was listening. Justice is not about arrogance or history, it's about truth, and the truth is always the most powerful weapon. As the dust settles on this monumental moment, one thing is clear: Jasmine Crockett didn't just defeat Alan Dershowitz, she reshaped the conversation about justice, equality, and the future of law. In a single moment, she turned a personal attack into a powerful lesson for the world, proving that true strength comes not from power or prestige, but from integrity, knowledge, and grace. What happened today wasn't just a victory in the courtroom or on stage, it was a victory for everyone who has ever felt marginalized, for everyone who has fought against an unjust system, and for everyone who believes that the law should serve all people, not just the powerful. Jasmine Crockett's unwavering commitment to fairness and her courageous stand against the establishment have inspired millions. But this is just the beginning. Jasmine's fight is the fight for all of us, the fight for a justice system that reflects the needs of the many, not the few. It's a fight we must continue, together. If you believe in justice, equality, and truth, then this story is for you. Jasmine's victory is a reminder that, no matter the obstacles, we all have the power to challenge the status quo and make a difference. So, share this video, engage with the message, and let's keep this conversation going. The fight for justice isn't over, and it's one we all need to be a part of. Subscribe for more powerful stories, and be part of the movement for justice and truth.